The moment Dante Russo's eyes locked on Ella Carter across a crowded dining room, her ordinary life shattered. She was just a waitress, invisible, forgettable, safe. But to him, she was something else entirely. What started as a single glance became an obsession that would drag her from the margins of survival into the violent, intoxicating heart of his criminal empire. She thought she was serving dinner. She had no idea she was walking into a trap set by the most dangerous man in the city, a man who had been watching her far longer than she ever realized, and who would stop at nothing to make her his. If you're ready for a story about power, obsession, and a love that breaks every rule, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and let's dive in. The restaurant smelled like money. Not the clean, crisp kind that comes from a new wallet, but the older, heavier scent, leather, cigars, wine that cost more than Ella's rent. It clung to the velvet curtains, soaked into the Persian rugs, lingered in the air like an unspoken threat. Ella Carter had been working at Aurelio's for 8 months, and she still wasn't used to it, the weight of it, the way the chandeliers threw golden light across faces that never smiled at people like her. She was 23 and invisible. That was the trick to surviving here, learning how to be seen just enough to do your job, but not so much that anyone actually looked. The men who ate here didn't see waitresses. They saw obstacles, background noise, moving pieces in a game Ella didn't understand and didn't want to. She'd perfected the art of it. Keep your head down, your voice pleasant, your hands steady. Collect your tips. Go home. Don't ask questions. Tonight was supposed to be like any other night. She'd clocked in at 5, tied her hair back in a neat bun that made her look older than she was, and pulled on the black dress that all the servers wore. Simple, expensive, designed to blend. The Friday crowd was already filtering in by the time she hit the floor, and the kitchen was chaos. Aurelio himself was barking orders in rapid Italian, his face red, his hands moving like a conductor's. Ella had learned to tune it out. She took her section, 4 tables near the back, the quieter ones, and started her routine. Smile, nod, pour water, recite specials. It was mechanical, safe, boring. And then Marco, the floor manager, grabbed her elbow halfway through her second table. "You're being moved," he said. Ella blinked. "What?" "VIP section, table 12. Her stomach dropped. "Marco, It's not a request." His voice was flat, his eyes already darting past her toward the entrance. "Antonio called in sick. You're covering." She wanted to argue. The VIP section wasn't just different, it was another world. The people who sat there didn't tip better. They tipped worse, because they assumed the restaurant comped everything anyway. They were demanding, rude, and they had security, actual armed men who stood in corners and watched. But Marco was already walking away, and Ella knew better than to push. She grabbed a fresh towel, straightened her apron, and headed toward the corner of the restaurant she'd spent 8 months avoiding. Table 12 was in the back, tucked into an alcove framed by dark wood panels and low-hanging Edison bulbs. It was private, separate, like it existed in its own pocket of reality. Ella approached slowly, her shoes silent on the thick carpet, her heart tapping an uneven rhythm against her ribs. There were 4 men at the table, 3 of them barely registered, big, broad-shouldered, expensive suits that didn't quite hide the bulk beneath. They had the look of men who got paid to stand still and hurt people when necessary. One of them glanced at her as she approached, his expression as blank as a wall. But the 4th man, Ella's breath caught. He sat at the head of the table, one hand resting lightly on the stem of a wine glass, the other draped over the back of his chair like he owned not just the seat, but the room, the building, the air itself. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that looked like it had been cut with a knife, and eyes so sharp they could have drawn blood. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, and he wore it the way some men wore armor. He didn't look up when she stopped at the table. "Good evening," Ella said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "Can I start you gentlemen with something to drink?" One of the other men, a thick-necked guy with a scar running down his jaw, grunted, "Whiskey! Neat!" The others echoed orders. Bourbon, scotch, another whiskey. The man at the head of the table said nothing. Ella waited. Her pen hovered over her notepad, her pulse loud in her ears. She didn't know why she was nervous. It wasn't the first time she'd served someone who looked dangerous. Aurelio's attracted a certain kind of clientele, people with power, people with secrets. But this was different. This man felt different. Finally, he lifted his gaze, and Ella forgot how to breathe. His eyes were dark, nearly black, and they didn't just look at her. They saw her, really saw her, in a way that made her skin prickle and her stomach twist. It wasn't lecherous. It wasn't even friendly. It was something else entirely, something that felt like recognition, though Ella knew for certain she'd never seen him before in her life. "Water," he said. His voice was low, smooth, and faintly accented. Italian, maybe, or something close. "Still, no ice." Ella nodded quickly. "Of course." She turned to go and his voice followed her. "What's your name?" She froze. It wasn't a strange question. Customers asked all the time, though usually it was the drunk ones, the ones who thought a first name was an invitation. But the way he asked it, calm, direct, like he already knew the answer and was just testing her, made something cold slide down her spine. She turned back. "Ella." He didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched her for another beat, then looked back at his menu. "Thank you, Ella." She walked away on legs that felt like water. The bar was packed, and it took her 3 minutes to get the drinks together. Her hands were shaking. She told herself it was nothing, just nerves, just the usual anxiety that came with working the VIP section. But when she returned to table 12 and set the glasses down one by one, she could feel his eyes on her the entire time. He didn't speak again, didn't acknowledge her. But Ella knew, somehow, instinctively, that he was aware of every move she made, every breath. The rest of the night blurred. She took orders, delivered food, refilled drinks. The men at table 12 barely spoke, and when they did, it was in low tones she couldn't hear. The man at the head, Ella still didn't know his name, ate slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. He didn't touch his phone, didn't check his watch, just existed in a way that made the room bend around him. By the time they asked for the check, Ella's nerves were frayed. She brought the leather portfolio to the table, set it down gently, and stepped back. The scarred man pulled out a black credit card without looking at the total. Ella took it, ran it, brought it back. And when she set the receipt down, the man at the head of the table spoke again. "You work here often?" Ella hesitated. 5 nights a week. "Late shifts?" Her mouth went dry. "Usually." He nodded slowly like she'd confirmed something. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a money clip. Thick, silver, stuffed with hundreds. He peeled off 5 bills and set them on the table. $500. Ella stared. "Thank you for your service," he said quietly. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. So she just nodded, mumbled something that might have been "thank you," and walked away with the cash burning a hole in her apron. When she glanced back, the table was empty. They were gone. Ella's shift ended at midnight. She changed out of her uniform in the cramped staff bathroom, pulled on jeans and a hoodie, and stuffed the $500 into her bag like it might disappear if she didn't keep it close. Her hands were still shaking. She told herself it was the adrenaline, the weird intensity of the night, nothing more. The streets outside Aurelio's were empty. The restaurant sat on the edge of the financial district, where skyscrapers gave way to older buildings and narrow alleys. It was the kind of neighborhood that looked safe during the day and felt dangerous after dark. Ella usually took the bus, but tonight she'd missed the last one. So she walked. Her apartment was 20 minutes away. She kept her head down, her keys tucked between her fingers like a weapon. Her phone in her other hand with 911 already dialed, her thumb hovering over the call button. She made it 3 blocks before she realized she was being followed. It started as a feeling, a prickle at the back of her neck. The sense that the street behind her wasn't as empty as it should be. She glanced over her shoulder once, saw nothing, and kept walking, faster now. The footsteps matched her pace. Ella's heart kicked into overdrive. She turned a corner, then another, trying to lose whoever it was. But the footsteps stayed with her, steady and relentless. She risked another glance back, and this time she saw them. 2 men, big, moving with purpose. Panic flooded her veins. She broke into a run. The alley ahead was narrow, dark, lined with dumpsters and fire escapes. Ella didn't think, just bolted toward it, her bag bouncing against her hip, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear them behind her, closer now, their footsteps heavy and fast. She wasn't going to make it. And then, a car screeched to a stop at the mouth of the alley. Black, sleek, expensive. The passenger door flew open and a voice cut through the night. "Get in." Ella skidded to a halt, her chest heaving, her vision swimming. She looked at the car, looked back at the men behind her who had stopped, their faces shadowed but tense. The voice came again, calm, commanding. Now! She didn't think, just moved. Ella threw herself into the car, and the door slammed shut behind her. The engine roared, and they were moving before she even had her seatbelt on. She twisted in her seat, looking back, and saw the two men standing in the alley, watching. Not chasing, just watching. Her breath came in sharp, painful bursts. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely grip the door handle. And then she looked at the driver. It was him, the man from table 12, Dante Russo. He didn't look at her, just drove, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression unreadable. The city blurred past the windows, streetlights, buildings, shadows. Ella's mind was racing, her thoughts tangled and useless. What? Her voice cracked. What the hell is happening? He didn't answer right away, just took a turn, smooth and controlled, and pulled onto a wider street. Then he glanced at her, and his eyes were calm. Too calm. You were being followed, he said simply. I know that! Ella's voice rose, panic sharpening into anger. Who were they? Why? They work for your boss. The words landed like a punch. Ella stared at him. What? Dante's jaw tightened. Marco Vitali, the man who owns Aurelio's. He's been using you, Ella. Using me for what? Cover. He said it like it was obvious, like she should have known. You're clean. No record, no connections, the kind of person no one looks at twice. That's why he hired you. That's why you've been working the quiet tables for 8 months while he runs money through the back. Ella's stomach dropped. That's insane. It's true. How do you know? Dante finally looked at her fully, and the weight of his gaze made her breath catch. Because I've been watching. The world seemed to tilt. Ella pressed herself back against the seat, her mind screaming. You've been watching me. Yes. For how long? Long enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. He pulled the car into an underground garage, sleek, modern, lit by cold white lights. Ella didn't recognize it, didn't know where they were. She reached for the door handle, but it didn't budge. Let me out, she said, her voice shaking. No. Let me out. Dante turned off the engine and shifted in his seat, facing her fully. His expression was still calm, still controlled, but there was something beneath it now, something darker. You don't understand, he said quietly. Those men weren't trying to scare you. They were sent to kill you. Ella's blood turned to ice. Why? Because you saw something. Or Marco thinks you did. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're not safe anymore. Then I'll go to the police. The police won't help you. His voice hardened. Marco owns half the precinct. You go to them. You're dead by morning. Ella's hands were trembling. Her whole body was trembling. So what am I supposed to do? Dante leaned closer, and his voice dropped to something almost gentle. You stay with me. She laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. Stay with you? I don't even know you. You know enough. I know nothing. Her voice cracked, and she hated the way it sounded. Small, scared, breakable. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. My name is Dante Russo, he said, cutting her off. I run the East Side. Everything from the docks to the financial district. Marco works for me. Or he did, until he got greedy. Ella stared at him, her mind struggling to process. You're yes, a criminal, a crime boss, the kind of man she'd spent her whole life avoiding, and now she was sitting in his car. I can't. She shook her head, her thoughts spinning. I can't do this. I need to go home. I need to. Your apartment isn't safe. Then I'll go somewhere else, a hotel, a friend's place. They'll find you. How do you know? Because I would. The certainty in his voice made her stomach twist. Ella looked at him, really looked at him, and saw no hesitation, no doubt, just cold, absolute confidence. This man had done terrible things. She could see it in the way he held himself, the way he spoke, the way he looked at her like she was already his. I don't have a choice, do I? She whispered. Dante's expression softened, just slightly. No. She closed her eyes, her chest tight, her world crumbling. When she opened them again, he was still watching her. Come on, he said quietly. Let's get you inside. The penthouse was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights stretching out like a blanket of stars. The furniture was modern, expensive, all clean lines and dark leather. Everything was pristine, controlled, like the man who lived here. Ella stood in the middle of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself, her bag still clutched in one hand. She felt like she was in a dream, a nightmare, something that couldn't possibly be real. Dante moved through the space with easy familiarity, shrugging out of his jacket and draping it over a chair. He poured himself a drink, whiskey, neat, and held up the bottle. Want one? Ella shook her head. He nodded, set the bottle down, and took a slow sip. Then he turned to face her. You'll stay in the guest room, he said. Second door on the left. There's a bathroom attached. Anything you need, you can ask. For how long? Until it's safe. And when will that be? Dante's jaw tightened. When I've dealt with Marco. Ella's breath hitched. What does that mean? He didn't answer. She took a step back, her pulse pounding. I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me. They won't. His voice was flat. Because you're going to stay here. Stay quiet and let me handle it. I'm not a prisoner. No, Dante said, his eyes locking on hers. You're under my protection. There's a difference. Ella wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but she was so tired, so scared, and some part of her, some small traitorous part, believed him when he said he'd keep her safe. She looked away, blinking back tears. I don't understand any of this. You will. Why me? Her voice broke. Why do you even care? Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his glass and crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Because, he said softly, you're the only real thing I've seen in years. Ella's breath caught, and before she could respond, he stepped back, his expression shuddering. Get some rest, he said. We'll talk in the morning. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Ella standing alone in the middle of his world, her heart pounding and her future hanging by a thread. She didn't sleep that night, just sat on the edge of the guest bed, staring at the door, wondering how her life had gone from invisible to inescapable in the span of a single evening, and knowing deep down that there was no going back. Morning came whether Ella wanted it to or not. She'd spent most of the night curled on top of the guest bed, too wired to sleep, too exhausted to think clearly. The room was absurdly comfortable, white sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, blackout curtains that turned the space into a cave, a bathroom with heated floors and a shower big enough for 3 people. It was luxury she'd only ever seen in magazines, and it made her skin crawl. This wasn't her life, but as light started creeping around the edges of the curtains, Ella had to accept that maybe it was now. She sat up, her body stiff, her mind foggy. Her phone was dead. She hadn't thought to grab a charger before being shoved into Dante's car. Her bag sat on the chair by the door, the $500 still inside like evidence of a crime she hadn't committed. Everything felt surreal, disconnected. She needed coffee. She needed answers. She needed to get out of here. Ella pushed off the bed and padded to the door, pressing her ear against it. Silence. She turned the handle slowly, half expecting it to be locked, but it swung open easily. The hallway beyond was empty, all polished hardwood and recessed lighting. She moved quietly, her bare feet soundless, following the smell of coffee toward what she assumed was the kitchen. She found it at the end of the hall, a massive open space with marble countertops, industrial appliances, and windows that looked out over the city's skyline. The view was dizzying. She was higher up than she'd realized. 30 floors, maybe more. And sitting at the island, reading something on a tablet, was Dante. He looked different in the daylight. Less like a shadow, more like a man. He'd changed clothes, dark jeans, a black t-shirt that fit him like it was custom made. His hair was still damp, like he'd just showered. He glanced up when she entered, his expression unreadable. Coffee's fresh, he said, nodding toward the machine. Ella hesitated, then moved to the counter. Her hands shook slightly as she poured herself a cup. She didn't add anything, no milk, no sugar, just wrapped her fingers around the mug and let the heat ground her. Did you sleep? Dante asked. No. Neither did I. She looked at him, surprised. He didn't look tired. Didn't look like anything, just calm, controlled, like he always was. How do you do that? The words came out before she could stop them. Do what? Act like this is normal. Dante set down his tablet. It is normal. For me. Well, it's not for me. Ella's voice cracked. I'm a waitress. I serve food. I go home. I watch Netflix and eat cereal for dinner and worry about my electric bill. I don't. She gestured around the penthouse. I don't do this. You do now. I didn't choose this. No, Dante said quietly. You didn't. But here you are. Ella wanted to throw the coffee in his face, wanted to scream, but she just stood there, her throat tight, her eyes burning. Dante watched her for a moment, then stood. He crossed to the fridge, pulled out eggs, butter, bread, started moving around the kitchen like he actually knew what he was doing. When's the last time you ate? He asked. Ella blinked. What? Food. When? She tried to remember. Yesterday before her shift, maybe? A protein bar she'd grabbed from the corner store. Her stomach growled in response, betraying her. That's what I thought. Dante cracked eggs into a pan, his movements efficient. Sit. I'm not hungry. You're lying. Ella opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Because he was right. She was starving. And despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the complete insanity of her situation, her body still needed fuel. She sat. They didn't talk while he cooked. Ella sipped her coffee and watched him work, trying to reconcile this version of Dante with the one from last night. The crime boss. The man who casually admitted to running half the city. He didn't look dangerous right now. He just looked normal, like someone's boyfriend making breakfast. It was unsettling. He slid a plate in front of her, scrambled eggs, toast, perfectly browned. Then he made one for himself and sat across from her. Eat, he said. Ella picked up her fork. The eggs were good, better than good. She hated that. You cook, she said after a minute. Sometimes. Why? Dante shrugged. My mother taught me, said a man who can't feed himself is useless. It was the first personal thing he'd told her. Ella filed it away, not sure what to do with it. They ate in silence. When Ella finished, Dante took her plate without a word and rinsed it in the sink. Then he turned back to her, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed. We need to talk, he said. Ella's stomach twisted. About? What happens next? I want to go home. That's not an option. You can't keep me here. I can, and I will. His voice was calm but final. Until Marco is dealt with, you're staying. For how long? However long it takes. Ella pushed back from the island, her chair scraping against the floor. This is kidnapping. This is protection. I didn't ask for your protection. You didn't have to. Dante's eyes locked on hers. Those men last night weren't playing games, Ella. They were sent to eliminate a problem. You. Whether you like it or not, you're involved now. And the only way you survive is if you trust me. Trust you? Ella laughed bitterly. I don't even know you. Then let me fix that. He moved to the living room, and after a moment, Ella followed. He gestured for her to sit on the couch, then settled into the chair across from her. The distance felt deliberate, like he was trying not to crowd her. My name is Dante Russo, he began, his voice measured. I'm 32. I've been running the East Side for 6 years. Before that, I worked for my uncle, learned the business, built connections, made myself useful. When he retired, I took over. Retired, Ella repeated. That's one way to put it. Dante's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He's alive, if that's what you're asking. Living in Sicily, sends me wine at Christmas. How nice. I'm not a good man, Ella. I'm not going to pretend I am. But I'm not a monster either. I have rules. I don't hurt civilians. I don't touch kids. And I don't let people who work for me cross lines. Like Marco. Like Marco. Ella pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. What did he do? He's been skimming, laundering money through Aurelio's without my approval, using the restaurant as cover for deals I didn't authorize. And when I found out, he panicked. So he tried to kill me. He tried to tie up loose ends. Dante's jaw tightened. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now you're a liability. I didn't see anything. Doesn't matter. He thinks you did. Ella's head was spinning. So what are you going to do? Dante didn't answer right away, just looked at her, his expression unreadable. I'm going to make sure you're safe, he said finally, and I'm going to remind Marco what happens when people forget who they work for. The way he said it, calm, cold, absolute, made Ella's blood run cold. You're going to kill him. Probably. Jesus Christ. Don't, Dante said sharply. Don't act shocked. You knew what I was the moment I told you my name. This is my world, Ella. People don't get second chances here. They get examples. Ella felt sick. I can't be part of this. You already are. I didn't choose. Life doesn't care what you choose. His voice rose just slightly, and Ella flinched. Dante seemed to catch himself, his expression softening. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I know this is hard. I know you're scared. But you need to understand something. The moment I pulled you into that car, you became mine to protect. And I don't let go of what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have terrified her, should have sent her running, but instead, it settled over her like a weight, heavy, suffocating, and somehow secure. Ella looked away, her throat tight. I don't belong here. Not yet, Dante agreed, but you will. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended state. Dante left mid-morning, flanked by two men Ella hadn't seen before. Both big, both silent, both armed. He didn't tell her where he was going, and she didn't ask. Just watched him leave from the window, her stomach in knots. She was alone in the penthouse. Completely alone. And yet she didn't try to leave. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe some part of her believed him when he said this was the only safe place left. She explored the space slowly, taking inventory. 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a home office with walls lined with books she suspected Dante had never read, a gym with equipment that looked brand new. Everything was pristine, impersonal, like a hotel, not a home. The only exception was the office. Ella found it by accident, trying to find a phone charger. The door had been slightly ajar, and when she pushed it open, she froze. The walls were covered in photographs, not of Dante, of her. Ella at work, carrying a tray. Ella leaving Aurelio's through the back entrance. Ella at the bus stop, her face turned toward the street. Ella in her apartment building, visible through her kitchen window. There were dozens of them, maybe more, all taken from a distance, all candid, all proof that Dante had been watching her for far longer than she'd imagined. Her hands started shaking. She backed out of the room, her heart pounding, her mind screaming. This wasn't protection. This was obsession. When Dante returned that evening, Ella was waiting for him in the living room. She stood the moment he walked in, her arms crossed, her expression cold. What the hell is wrong with you? She demanded. Dante paused, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? The office, the pictures. His face went blank. Then slowly he nodded. You weren't supposed to see those. No kidding. Ella, how long? Her voice shook. How long have you been watching me? Dante set down his keys, his movements deliberate. 4 months. The number hit her like a fist. 4 months? Yes. Why? Because I wanted to know you. That's not knowing someone, Ella's voice cracked. That's stalking. I know. She stared at him, waiting for excuses, explanations, anything. But he just stood there, calm and unflinching. You're insane, she whispered. Maybe. Dante took a step closer. But I kept you alive, didn't I? Ella wanted to hit him, wanted to run, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. You had no right, she said. I had every right. His voice dropped, low and rough. You were working for a man who would have gotten you killed. You were invisible, alone, and no one was looking out for you. So I did. I didn't need you to. Yes, you did. He was close now, too close. You just didn't know it yet. Ella's chest was heaving, her pulse racing. She felt trapped, cornered, and the worst part was some small, broken part of her wanted to believe him. I want to leave, she said. No, you don't. Yes, I do. Then go. Dante stepped back, spreading his arms. The door's unlocked. The elevator works. Walk out. See how long you last. Ella's hands clenched into fists. You're a bastard. I know. They stood there, locked in a silent standoff, the air between them crackling with tension. And then Ella did something she didn't expect. She started crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that slipped down her cheeks without permission. She hated it, hated feeling weak, hated that he was seeing her like this. Dante's expression shifted, softened. He took a step forward, then stopped like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. Ella, he said quietly, Don't. She wiped her face roughly. Just don't. But he moved anyway, crossed the space between them and stood there, close enough to touch. And when she didn't pull away, he lifted a hand and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so gentle it broke something inside her. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice was rough, raw. "I'm sorry you're scared. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. But I'm not sorry I kept you safe, and I won't apologize for wanting you here." Ella looked up at him, her vision blurred. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. You know what I look like when I'm working. That's not the same thing. I know you're kind," Dante said. "I've watched you give your tips to the dishwashers. I've seen you cover shifts for people who don't deserve it. I know you smile at strangers, and you don't complain even when you're exhausted. I know you're stronger than you think, and I know—" His voice caught. "I know I don't deserve you, but I'm keeping you anyway." Ella's breath hitched, and before she could stop herself, she leaned into him. Just a little. Just enough that her forehead rested against his chest. Dante went still. Then slowly his arms came around her. Not tight, not possessive. Just there. Steady. They stood like that for a long time, neither of them speaking. And for the first time since this nightmare started, Ella felt something other than fear. She felt seen. The days that followed settled into a strange, uneasy rhythm. Dante left most mornings and returned most nights. He never told her where he went, but Ella could guess. Meetings, deals, whatever it was crime bosses did. Sometimes he came back with blood on his knuckles. Sometimes he came back quiet and tense, like he was holding something dangerous inside. Ella didn't ask. She spent her days in the penthouse, pacing, reading, trying to keep her mind occupied. Dante had given her access to his credit cards, told her to order whatever she needed, but she couldn't bring herself to use them. It felt too much like accepting this, like giving in. But slowly, inevitably, she started to adapt. She learned the rhythms of the building, the security guard who nodded at her when she went to the gym, the cleaning crew that came on Wednesdays, the way the city looked at sunrise from the living room windows. She learned Dante, too. He was quieter than she'd expected, more careful. He gave her space, never pushed, never demanded, but he was always there, always watching. Like he was afraid she'd disappear if he looked away. One night, she found him on the balcony, smoking a cigarette and staring out at the city. "I didn't know you smoked," she said. He glanced at her. "I don't, usually." "Bad day?" "Something like that." Ella leaned against the railing beside him. The air was cool, the city lights stretched out below them like a galaxy. She should have been inside, should have kept her distance, but she didn't. "Did you kill him?" she asked quietly. Dante took a drag, then exhaled slowly. "Who?" "Marco." "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I'm making a point." He flicked ash over the edge. "People need to see what happens when they cross me. Killing him quickly doesn't send the right message." Ella's stomach turned. "That's cruel. That's survival." She looked at him, really looked at him. At the hard lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes never stopped moving. He looked tired, older than 32. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "What?" "This life." Dante was quiet for a long time. Then he crushed out his cigarette and turned to face her. "Every day," he said. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. "Then why do it?" "Because I'm good at it. Because it's all I know. Because walking away isn't an option." "Everyone has options." "Not people like me." Ella frowned. "You're not a monster, Dante." "Yes, I am." He said it simply, factually. "I've done things that would make you sick, hurt people, killed people. And I'll do it again if I have to. That's what I am, Ella, and you need to accept that if you're going to stay here." "I'm not staying," she said automatically. Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Keep telling yourself that." He walked past her, back inside, leaving Ella alone on the balcony with her thoughts and the cold night air. She didn't follow him, but she didn't leave either. 2 weeks after Ella had been pulled into Dante's world, everything changed. It started with a phone call. Dante was in the kitchen making coffee when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "I need to take this," he said, and disappeared into his office. Ella tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the book she'd been pretending to read. But 10 minutes later, Dante emerged, his face like stone. "Get dressed," he said. "What? Why?" "We're leaving." "Where are we going?" Somewhere safe. Ella's pulse spiked. What happened? Dante didn't answer, just grabbed his jacket and his gun. Ella had learned to recognize the bulge under his clothes and headed for the door. Dante! He stopped, turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something in his eyes that looked like fear. Marco knows you're here, he said quietly, and he's coming. Ella's blood turned to ice. They were gone within 5 minutes, flanked by 3 armed men she'd never seen before. Dante kept her close, his hand on her lower back, his body positioned between her and the world. They moved through the building's underground garage, into a different car, and onto streets that blurred past in the dark. Ella didn't ask questions, didn't speak, just tried to breathe. They ended up at another building, smaller, older. Dante led her inside, up 3 flights of stairs, into an apartment that smelled like dust and disuse. Stay here, he said. Don't leave. Don't open the door for anyone. Where are you going? To finish this. Dante. I'll be back. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. I promise. And then he was gone. Ella stood in the empty apartment, her heart pounding, her mind spinning, and she realized with a terrible aching clarity that she didn't want him to leave. She wanted him to stay. She wanted him. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic below. Ella stood in the middle of the cramped living room, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to make sense of what had just happened. 1 minute, she'd been drinking coffee in a penthouse that cost more than she'd earned in 10 years. The next, she was hiding in a safe house that smelled like mildew and old carpet, while Dante went off to do something that would probably get him killed, or get someone else killed. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the spiral of her thoughts. This wasn't her life. This couldn't be her life. But the evidence was hard to ignore. The locked door, the burner phone Dante had shoved into her hand before leaving, the gun he'd left on the kitchen counter with instructions she'd been too shocked to process. If anyone comes through that door who isn't me, he'd said, his voice clipped and urgent, you use it. Ella had stared at the weapon like it might bite her. I don't know how to... Point. Pull the trigger. Don't think. He'd already been halfway out the door. I'll be back in 3 hours, 4 at most. That had been 6 hours ago. Ella checked the phone for the 100th time. No messages, no calls. Just a blank screen and a battery at 40%. She wanted to call him, wanted to demand answers. But she didn't even have his number saved, just the emergency contact he'd programmed in, labeled simply as D. She moved to the window and peered through the grimy blinds. The street below was empty, slick with rain that had started falling an hour ago. A few parked cars. A bodega on the corner with flickering neon. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that screamed danger. But Ella had learned that danger didn't always announce itself. She let the blinds fall back into place and paced the small space, her mind racing. What was Dante doing right now? Was he hurt? Was Marco already dead? And if so, what did that mean for her? Could she go back to her life? Back to her apartment, her job, her invisibility? Did she even want to? The thought stopped her cold, because somewhere between the terror and the chaos, something had shifted. She'd spent 2 weeks in Dante's world, watching him move through it with the kind of certainty she'd never possessed. He was brutal, yes, dangerous, absolutely, but he was also careful, deliberate, and he'd kept every promise he'd made to her, even the ones she hadn't asked for. He'd protected her, provided for her, seen her. And she'd started to see him too. Not just the crime boss with blood on his hands, but the man who made her breakfast and asked if she'd slept. The man who read in the evenings with reading glasses he seemed embarrassed to wear. The man who stood on the balcony at 2 a.m, smoking cigarettes he didn't want, carrying weight he'd never put down. Ella sank onto the worn couch, her head in her hands. She was falling for him. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She was falling for a man who'd stalked her, kidnapped her, dragged her into a war she didn't understand. A man who killed people. A man who would never be safe, never be normal, never be anything close to what she'd imagined for herself. And yet, the door rattled. Ella's head snapped up, her heart leaping into her throat. She bolted to her feet, her eyes darting to the kitchen where the gun still sat on the counter. The lock clicked. The handle turned. She grabbed the weapon with shaking hands, her finger finding the trigger, her whole body trembling. The door swung open. Dante stepped inside. Ella nearly dropped the gun. He looked like hell. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, dark stains spreading across the fabric that she knew knew was blood. His knuckles were split and raw, his jaw tight with pain. But he was alive. He was here. Jesus Christ, she breathed. Dante closed the door behind him, locked it, and leaned against the frame like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His eyes found hers, and something in them softened. "You can put that down now," he said quietly. Ella looked down at the gun in her hands, then carefully set it on the coffee table. Her legs felt like water. "You're bleeding." "I know." "How bad?" "Not bad enough." He pushed off the door and moved toward the bathroom, his gait uneven. "I need to clean up." Ella followed him without thinking, her training as a person who'd spent years taking care of people kicking in. "Let me help." "I've got it." "Dante, you can barely stand." He stopped in the doorway, his back to her, his shoulders tense. Then he let out a long breath and nodded. The bathroom was tiny, barely room for both of them. Dante sat on the edge of the tub while Ella rummaged through the cabinet, finding a first aid kit that looked military grade. She pulled out gauze, antiseptic, medical tape, and turned to face him. "Shirt off," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Bossy. You're bleeding all over the floor. Off." Dante peeled the shirt over his head with a wince, and Ella's breath caught. His torso was a map of violence. Old scars, new bruises, and a fresh gash across his ribs that was still seeping. But beneath all of it was muscle and ink, a tattoo that covered most of his left side, intricate and dark. She tried not to stare. "It's not as bad as it looks," Dante said, watching her face. "Looks pretty bad." "I've had worse." Ella dampened a cloth with antiseptic and knelt in front of him. "This is going to hurt." "I can handle it." She pressed the cloth to the wound, and Dante hissed through his teeth, his hands gripping the edge of the tub. Ella worked quickly, cleaning the blood, checking for debris. The cut was long, but shallow. He'd been lucky. "What happened?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "I took care of it." "That's not an answer." Dante was quiet for a moment. Then, "Marco's dead." Ella's hand stilled. "You killed him." "Yes." "Where?" "The docks. He was trying to leave the city. Thought he could run." Dante's voice was flat, empty. "He was wrong." Ella resumed cleaning the wound, her stomach churning. Did he say anything?" "He begged." Dante's jaw tightened. They always do. She didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know. Just focused on the task in front of her, bandaging him up, keeping him together. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, her hands stained with his blood. "There were others," Dante said quietly. 3 of his men. They put up a fight. "Are they dead?" "All of them." Ella's chest tightened. "And your people?" "One injured. He'll live." Dante reached out and gently took her wrist, turning her hand over to look at the blood. "You did good." "I didn't do anything." "You stayed. You waited." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "That's more than most people would do." Ella met his eyes, and the weight in them nearly broke her. "You said you'd come back." "I keep my promises." "Do you?" "Always." She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed every word. Dante stood slowly, testing his weight, and moved to the sink. He washed his hands, his face, the back of his neck. Ella watched him, unable to look away. When he turned back to her, some of the tension had bled out of him. "It's done," he said. "Marco's gone. His operation's being absorbed. The people who wanted you dead are either dead themselves or too scared to try." Ella's heart thudded. "So I can go home." Dante's expression shuddered. "If that's what you want." It should have been. It should have been the only thing she wanted. But standing there in that cramped bathroom, looking at this man who'd turned her life inside out, Ella realized she didn't know what she wanted anymore. "Is it safe?" she asked instead. "As safe as it's going to be." "That's not a yes." "Nothing's ever completely safe, Ella, but you're not a target anymore. You can go back to your apartment, back to work, back to your life." He paused. "If that's what you want." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true. I won't keep you here if you don't want to stay." Ella's throat tightened. "And if I do?" The question hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Dante went very still, his eyes searching hers. "Then you stay," he said quietly. "Just like that?" "Just like that." "What does that mean? For me? For us?" "It means your mind to protect. To provide for. To... He stopped himself, jaw tightening. It means I take care of you. Whatever you need. And what do you get out of it? Dante moved closer, slow and deliberate, until there was barely any space between them. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. You, he said simply. Ella's breath caught. That's it? That's everything. She should have pulled away, should have run, but instead she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. You're a criminal. I know. You've killed people. I know. I should be terrified of you. You are. His voice was rough. But you're still here. Ella opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd watched her for months, who'd pulled her out of danger, who'd kept her safe even when she'd fought him every step of the way, the man who made her feel seen for the first time in her life. I'm still here, she agreed. And then, before she could second-guess herself, she kissed him. It wasn't soft, wasn't tentative. It was desperate and messy and real, all the fear and tension and need she'd been holding back pouring out in one moment. Dante froze for half a second. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, kissing her back with an intensity that stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Ella, Dante said, his voice strained. Don't. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't talk, don't think, just... He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation. Just heat and want, and the kind of connection that felt like falling. They barely made it to the bedroom. Afterward, they lay tangled in the small bed, the rain still pattering against the window. Ella's head rested on Dante's chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, his breathing slow and even. I watched you for 4 months before I approached you, he said quietly. Ella went still. I know. I told myself it was business, that I needed to understand Marco's operation, but that was a lie. His hand stilled. I saw you on a Tuesday. You were leaving work, and it was pouring. You gave your umbrella to an old man waiting for the bus. Ella remembered. She'd gotten soaked. You didn't think twice about it, Dante continued. Just handed it over and ran, and I thought... He paused. I thought I'd never seen anything like that. Someone who gave without expecting anything back. It was just an umbrella. It wasn't. Not to me. His voice dropped. I grew up in a world where everything's a transaction, where kindness is weakness. And then there you were, proving all of it wrong. Ella lifted her head to look at him. So you stalked me? Yes. That's creepy, Dante. I know. You can't just... She stopped, shaking her head. You should have just talked to me. And said what? Hi, I'm a crime boss, want to get coffee? Despite everything, Ella laughed. It came out shaky and a little broken, but it was real. Maybe not that. Dante's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. I'm not good at normal, Ella. This is all I know how to be. Then teach me, she said. Teach me your world. His expression shifted, surprise, then something deeper. Why? Because I'm here. Because I'm choosing this. She took a breath. Because I'm choosing you. Dante pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. This life, it's not safe. It's not easy. People will always be coming for me, for you, if they know you matter to me. Then we handle it, Ella said. Together. He was quiet for a long time, then, okay. Okay. Together. Ella closed her eyes, letting the words settle over her. Together. It was terrifying. It was insane. But it was also the truest thing she'd felt in years. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the rain washing the city clean outside. When Ella woke, sunlight was streaming through the blinds and Dante was gone. Panic spiked through her before she saw the note on the nightstand. Had to handle something. Back by noon. Door stays locked. D. She checked the time. 10:30, an hour and a half. Ella got up, found her clothes, and padded to the kitchen. The apartment looked different in daylight, shabbier, smaller, but also strangely safe. Like a hiding place. A cocoon. She made coffee with the ancient machine she found under the sink and stood by the window watching the street below. People move through their lives, walking dogs, carrying groceries, arguing on phone calls, normal people doing normal things. She wasn't sure she was one of them anymore. The burner phone buzzed. Ella grabbed it, heart racing. "D, don't leave. I mean it." She typed back, "I'm not going anywhere." A pause, then, "Good." Ella smiled despite herself. Dante returned at 11:45 carrying bags from a deli down the street. He looked better, cleaned up, wearing fresh clothes, the tension from last night mostly gone. He set the food on the counter and pulled Ella into a kiss that tasted like coffee and promise. "Hungry?" he asked. "Starving." They ate sandwiches at the tiny kitchen table, and Ella asked the question that had been nagging at her. "What happens now?" Dante swallowed, considering. "We go back to the penthouse, you get settled, and then we figure out what comes next." "What does that mean?" "It means I meant what I said. You stay. I take care of you. You finish school if you want, or don't. You work if you want, or don't. Whatever you need, it's yours." "That sounds like you're keeping me." "I am." Ella should have been offended, should have argued, but the certainty in his voice made her feel something she hadn't felt in years, secure. "And what do I do while you're out doing—" She gestured vaguely. "Crime boss things?" "Whatever you want. Study, read, learn to shoot." He smirked. "You were holding that gun all wrong last night." "I've never held a gun before last night." "I know. We'll fix that." Ella shook her head, half amused, half exasperated. "This is insane." "Probably. I'm really doing this." "You are." She looked at him. This man who'd turned her world upside down, who'd claimed her without asking, who was offering her a life she'd never imagined. And she realized she wasn't scared anymore. She was ready. "Okay," Ella said. "Let's go home." Dante's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. "Home," he repeated quietly, like he was testing the word. "Your place," she clarified. "For now." "For now," he agreed, but they both knew she meant something more. Yet, the next 2 weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and revelation. Dante took Ella back to the penthouse, and this time it felt different. Less like a prison, more like a sanctuary. She unpacked the few belongings she'd salvaged from her apartment, clothes, books, a photo of her parents who'd died when she was 19. Dante gave her space in his closet without her asking. Cleared a drawer, made room. He taught her things she'd never thought she'd need to know. How to handle a gun, how to spot a tail, how to recognize the signs of danger. He was patient, methodical, never condescending. And Ella learned quickly, driven by a need to understand this world she'd chosen. But there were softer moments, too. Nights where Dante cooked dinner and they ate on the balcony, watching the city lights come on one by one. Mornings where he brought her coffee in bed and they talked about nothing and everything. Afternoons where she studied for the online classes she'd enrolled in. Dante had paid the tuition without blinking. And he read beside her, his hand resting on her knee like an anchor. He was different with her, gentler, more open. The hard edges were still there, but they didn't cut as deep, and Ella started to see the man beneath the reputation. One night, she found him in his office, staring at the wall of photographs he'd never taken down. "You kept them," she said from the doorway. Dante glanced at her. "I should probably get rid of them." "Why haven't you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because they remind me of who you were before I ruined your life." Ella crossed the room and took his hand. "You didn't ruin it. You changed it." "Same thing." "No." She squeezed his fingers. "It's not." Dante pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Do you miss it? Your old life?" Ella thought about it. Really thought about it. The long shifts, the invisibility, the loneliness that had followed her everywhere. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But not as much as I thought I would." "What do you miss?" "The simplicity, knowing what each day would look like." "You can still have that." "Not here." "No," Dante agreed. "Not here." Ella turned to look at him. "Do you ever think about leaving, walking away from all of this?" "Every day." "Then why don't you?" "Because people depend on me. Because if I walk away, someone worse takes over. Because—" He stopped, his jaw tight. "Because what?" "Because I don't know how to be anything else." Ella's heart ached for him. For the boy who'd grown up in violence, who'd learned to survive by becoming the thing everyone feared. for the man who wanted something different but didn't know how to reach for it. You could learn, she said softly. Maybe. He kissed her temple. With you, maybe. It wasn't a promise, but it was hope, and that was enough. The danger came on a Thursday. Ella was in the penthouse alone, reading, when the power went out. She froze, her instincts, the ones Dante had spent weeks training, kicking in. She reached for her phone. Dead. The backup generator should have kicked in by now. It hadn't. Something was wrong. She moved to the door, pressed her ear against it. Footsteps. Multiple people. Coming closer. Her heart hammered. Dante was across town at a meeting. She was alone. Ella grabbed the gun from the safe in the bedroom. Dante had given her the code weeks ago, and positioned herself behind the kitchen island, her hand steady despite the fear coursing through her. The door burst open. 4 men flooded in, armed and efficient. Ella didn't hesitate. She fired. The first shot went wide, but the second caught one of them in the shoulder. He went down, cursing. The others scattered, taking cover. "She's armed," one of them shouted. Ella's hands were shaking now, but she kept the gun up, her breathing shallow. Dante's voice echoed in her head. "Don't think. Just react." She fired again, missed. The men were advancing, coordinated and professional. And then, gunfire erupted from the hallway. Different guns, heavier. Dante's men poured in, and chaos exploded. Ella dropped behind the island, her ears ringing, her pulse wild. The firefight lasted less than a minute, but it felt like hours. When silence finally fell, Ella lifted her head. 4 bodies, none of them Dante's people. And standing in the doorway, breathing hard and covered in someone else's blood, was Dante. His eyes found hers immediately. "Are you hurt?" Ella shook her head, unable to speak. Dante crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, his grip almost painful. "You're okay. You're okay." "I shot someone," Ella whispered. "I know. You did good. I could have died." "But you didn't." He pulled back, cupping her face. "You fought. You survived. I'm so damn proud of you." Ella started to shake then, the adrenaline crashing. Dante held her through it, his voice low and steady, anchoring her. When she finally calmed, she asked the question she already knew the answer to. "Who were they?" "Rivals, testing me, seeing if they could get to you." "Did they?" Dante's eyes went hard. "No, and they won't get another chance." Ella believed him, because she'd seen what he was capable of, what he would do to keep her safe. And she realized, standing there in the wreckage of her new life, that she would do the same for him. The penthouse was cleaned and repaired within 48 hours, but the echo of gunfire stayed with Ella longer than that. She'd killed a man. Not directly. He'd survived the shoulder wound, but she'd pulled the trigger with intent. She'd aimed at another human being and fired. The weight of it sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and cold, refusing to dissolve no matter how many times Dante told her she'd done what she had to do. "You protected yourself," he'd said that night, holding her while she couldn't sleep. "That's not something to feel guilty about." But Ella did feel guilty. She also felt something else, something darker that she didn't want to examine too closely. She felt powerful. For the first time in her life, she hadn't been helpless, hadn't been a victim. She'd fought back, and she'd survived. Dante watched her carefully in the days that followed, like he was waiting for her to break. But Ella didn't break. She got quieter, more thoughtful, but she didn't fall apart. Instead, she asked him to teach her more. "More what?" he'd asked, looking up from his laptop. "Everything. I want to know how to protect myself. Really protect myself. Not just fire a gun in a panic, but actually know what I'm doing." Dante had studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, so he taught her. Not just weapons, but strategy. How to read a room. How to identify exits. How to move through crowds without being noticed. How to notice when someone was following her. How to fight dirty if she had to. Eyes, throat, knees. No rules, no honor, just survival. Ella absorbed it all like she was learning a new language. Because in a way, she was. The language of Dante's world. The language of violence and power and control. But there were other lessons too, softer ones. Dante started bringing her to meetings. Not the dangerous ones, but the business ones. Sit-downs with restaurant owners who paid protection fees, developers who needed permits pushed through, Importers who moved goods Ella tried not to think too hard about. He'd introduce her simply as Ella, never explaining who she was or why she mattered. But people noticed. They always noticed. "Why do you bring me?" she asked one night after a particularly tense meeting with a man who owned half the waterfront. "Because you're smart," Dante said, loosening his tie. "And you see things I miss." "Like what?" "Like the fact that Carmine was lying about his profit margins. I saw you watching him." Ella had been watching him, had noticed the way his eyes shifted when he talked about his monthly numbers, the way his hands fidgeted with his watch. "He was skimming," she said. "By about 30%, yeah." Dante glanced at her. "How did you know?" "I've been a waitress for 6 years. You learn to read people when your tips depend on it." Dante smiled, a real smile, not the cold ones he used in meetings. "See? Smart." Ella felt something warm bloom in her chest. Pride, maybe, or purpose. She was becoming part of this world, not just someone sheltered by it. She was contributing, mattering. It should have scared her how good that felt. 3 weeks after the attack, Dante came home with a lawyer. Ella looked up from her textbook, Economics 101, which she was actually starting to enjoy, and blinked at the older woman standing in their living room. She was elegant, probably mid-50s, with sharp eyes and a briefcase that probably cost more than Ella's old car. "Ella, this is Patricia Moreno," Dante said. "She's going to help us with something." "Help with what?" Ella closed her textbook, suddenly nervous. Patricia smiled. It was professional, not unkind. "Mr. Russo has asked me to assist with your legal status. We're going to give you a new identity." The words landed like a physical blow. "A new identity," Ella repeated slowly. "It's necessary," Dante said, his voice careful. "Your old name is connected to Marco, to Aurelio's, to everything that happened. If anyone comes looking for loose ends, they'll find Ella Carter, but they won't find who you become." Ella's hands went cold. "You want me to disappear? I want you to be safe. By erasing who I am? By giving you a fresh start." Dante crossed to her, crouching beside the couch so they were eye level. "You can keep your first name if you want, but the rest, Carter, your social security number, your employment history, it all has to go. Patricia can create something new, something clean." Ella looked at the lawyer who nodded confirmation. "It's not uncommon in witness protection scenarios, though this is obviously different. You'd have a new last name, new documentation, a complete legal identity. For all intents and purposes, Ella Carter would cease to exist." The room felt too small suddenly, too close. "I need air," Ella said, standing abruptly. Dante rose with her. "Ella, I just need a minute." She walked out onto the balcony, gripping the railing, her breath coming too fast. Below, the city sprawled in every direction, indifferent to her crisis. She'd already lost so much: her job, her apartment, her old life. And now Dante was asking her to lose her name, the last piece of who she'd been before him. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. "I know it's a lot," Dante said quietly. "It's everything." "I know. Do you?" Ella spun to face him. "You've always been Dante Russo. You've never had to give up who you are. Haven't I?" His voice was soft, but edged with something raw. "I gave up who I wanted to be a long time ago. The moment I took over my uncle's business, I stopped being just Dante. I became the Russo legacy, the East Side boss, the man everyone fears. I don't get to be anything else." Ella's anger deflated slightly. "That's different, is it?" He moved closer. "We're both trapped by names that come with expectations. Yours just happens to come with danger." She wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. Being Ella Carter meant being connected to everything that had happened, to Marco's operation, to the attack, to a life that no longer existed. "What would my new name be?" she asked finally. Dante glanced back at Patricia, who tactfully remained inside. "That's up to you. We can choose something similar, or something completely different." Ella thought about it, about who she wanted to be in this new life she was building. "Ella Marconi," she said after a moment. Dante's eyebrows rose slightly. "Italian? If I'm going to be part of your world, I might as well sound like I belong in it." Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like relief. "Marconi, I like it. It's my mother's maiden name, or it was something like it. She changed it when she came to America." Ella looked down at her hands. I barely remember her, but I remember her telling me once that names carry power, that who we are is more than what we're called. Dante took her hands, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles. Then Ella Marconi it is. Patricia handled everything with quiet efficiency. Within 2 weeks, Ella Carter was gone from every database that mattered, and Ella Marconi existed in her place. New social security number, new birth certificate, new credit history carefully constructed to look legitimate. It was thorough and slightly terrifying. You're a ghost now, Patricia said when she delivered the final documents. Legally speaking, Ella Carter never worked at Aurelio's, never lived in that apartment, never existed beyond birth records that will never be accessed again. Ella stared at her new driver's license. Same photo, different name. It felt like looking at a stranger. After Patricia left, Dante found Ella in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with the documents spread around her. Having second thoughts? He asked. 100th thoughts, maybe. She picked up the Social Security card. This is so illegal. Extremely. I could go to prison. You won't. How do you know? Because I won't let that happen. Dante sat beside her. And because Patricia's the best. She's done this for dozens of people. Witness protection, foreign agents, people fleeing bad situations. You're safer now than you were with your real name. Ella turned the card over in her fingers. It doesn't feel real. It will. Give it time. She leaned into him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They sat like that for a while, surrounded by paper proof of a life that hadn't existed yesterday. Thank you, Ella said quietly. For what? For caring enough to do this, even though I fought you on it. Dante pressed a kiss to her temple. I'd do anything to keep you safe. You know that by now. She did know, and that was what scared her most. Not that he was capable of terrible things, but that he'd do them without hesitation if it meant protecting her. With her new identity came new opportunities. Dante enrolled her in a proper university, a prestigious private school across town where she could finish her degree in person instead of through a computer screen. He'd wanted to hire tutors, bring the education to her, but Ella had insisted on going to campus. I need normal, she'd said, or at least something close to it. Dante had agreed, though he'd assigned her security. 2 men in civilian clothes who followed at a distance, never obvious but always there. Ella had protested at first, but Dante had been immovable on this point. You go to school, you do it safely, non-negotiable. So Ella learned to navigate campus with shadows. It was strange at first, knowing they were watching, but eventually she stopped noticing. They were good at their job, invisible, until needed. Classes were harder than she'd expected. Not intellectually, but socially. She was older than most of the other students, and she carried herself differently. While they stressed about exams and relationships and whether they'd get into grad school, Ella stressed about whether the rival family that had sent men to kill her might try again. The disconnect was surreal, but she found her rhythm. Buried herself in economics and business theory, fascinated by the legitimate version of the world Dante operated in. The principles were the same: supply and demand, risk assessment, market control, just with different stakes and legal consequences. One afternoon, her professor asked her to stay after class. Dr. Rebecca Chen was in her 40s, sharp and no-nonsense, with a reputation for being brilliant and difficult. Ella had been careful not to stand out in her class, but apparently she'd failed. Ms. Marconi, Dr. Chen said, perching on the edge of her desk, your last paper was exceptional. Ella's guard went up automatically. Thank you. I mean it. Your analysis of monopolistic competition in unregulated markets was some of the most sophisticated work I've seen from an undergraduate. Where did you learn to think like that? I read a lot, Ella said carefully. Dr. Chen smiled like she didn't quite believe that. You should consider graduate school. With work like this, you could easily get into a top MBA program. The suggestion caught Ella off guard. Graduate school. A future beyond just surviving day to day. She hadn't thought that far ahead. I'll think about it, she said. Do that. And if you need a recommendation letter, I'd be happy to write one. Ella left campus that day with her mind spinning. She'd been so focused on adapting to Dante's world that she hadn't considered building something of her own within it. But why couldn't she? Dante had money, resources, connections, and she had a brain that was apparently better than she'd given herself credit for. She brought it up over dinner that night. Dr. Chen thinks I should go to business school, she said, pushing pasta around her plate. Dante looked up. What do you think? I think it sounds insane. I'm barely keeping up with undergraduate work. You're getting straight A's because I study constantly. So you're good at it. Dante set down his fork. If you want to go to business school, you should do it. Just like that? Just like that. Ella studied his face, looking for the catch. It would be expensive. Money isn't an issue. It would take 2 years, maybe more. So I'd be busy, focused on that instead of... She gestured vaguely between them. Dante reached across the table and took her hand. Ella, I don't want you to give up your life for me. I want you to build one with me. If business school is part of that, then we make it work. The certainty in his voice made her chest tight. You really mean that? Always. Ella squeezed his fingers. Okay, I'll apply. Dante smiled, and it was one of those rare, genuine ones that transformed his entire face. Good. And when you get your MBA, maybe you can help me go legitimate. She laughed, startled. You want to go legitimate? Someday. Not now, but someday. His expression turned serious. I told you before, I think about leaving this life every day. But I can't just walk away. The businesses, the people who depend on me, the enemies who'd see it as weakness, it's complicated. But if I had a way out, a real plan, maybe I could do it. Ella's mind was already turning over the possibilities. You'd need to clean the money, invest in legitimate businesses, build a public reputation separate from your underground one. Exactly. That would take years, maybe a decade. I've got time. Ella looked at him, this man who'd dragged her into darkness, but was now talking about finding light, and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about building something, together. Then let's do it, she said. Dante lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Together. But going legitimate was a distant goal. In the present, Dante's world was still violent and unpredictable. The family that had sent men to the penthouse didn't give up. They just got smarter. Ella was leaving campus one evening when her security team intercepted her before she reached the car. Change of plans, one of them, Marcus, a former Marine with a scar across his jaw, said. We're taking a different route. Why? Possible tail, could be nothing, but we're not taking chances. Ella's pulse kicked up, but she nodded and followed them to a different vehicle. They took surface streets instead of the highway, doubling back several times. She watched the city pass by, her hand resting on the phone in her pocket. Dante had given her a new one, encrypted and untraceable, with a single button that would alert him if she was in trouble. She didn't press it, not yet. They made it back to the building without incident, but Marcus walked her all the way to the penthouse door. Mr. Russo wants you to stay inside tonight, he said. He's handling something. What something? Marcus's expression was stone. Above my pay grade, ma'am. Ella wanted to argue, but knew it wouldn't help. She went inside and paced the living room, her anxiety building with every passing minute. When Dante finally came home 3 hours later, she was ready to explode. Where were you? She demanded. Dante closed the door, his face tired. Sending a message. What kind of message? The kind that makes sure no one follows you again. Ella's stomach twisted. Dante, it's handled. He moved past her toward the bedroom, already unbuttoning his shirt. There was blood on his cuff. Not much, but enough. Ella followed him. You can't keep doing this. Every time something happens, you go out and hurt people. They tried to hurt you first. So what? We just keep escalating until someone ends up dead? Dante spun to face her, his eyes hard. Yes, if that's what it takes. That's insane. That's survival. His voice rose, frustration bleeding through. You think I want to keep doing this? You think I enjoy it? I'm trying to keep you safe, Ella. That means eliminating threats before they become problems. By becoming the biggest threat yourself. Exactly. He yanked off his shirt and threw it in the hamper. That's how this world works. You're the most dangerous person in the room, or you're a victim. There's no middle ground. Ella's hands clenched into fists. There has to be another way. There isn't. Dante's voice softened slightly. Not yet. Not while people still see you as a way to get to me. Then maybe I shouldn't be with you. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and jagged. Dante went very still. Is that what you want? Ella's throat closed up. No. But I don't want you killing people because of me either. Too late. He crossed to her, his movements deliberate. The moment you became mine, you became a target. and I will do whatever it takes to protect what's mine. If you can't accept that, then we have a problem." Ella met his eyes, saw the absolute certainty there, and realized they'd reached a fundamental impasse. Dante would never stop being what he was, and she would never stop struggling with what that meant. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "I'm trying to accept all of this. But it's hard." Dante's expression softened. He reached up and cupped her face, his touch gentle despite everything. "I know. And I know I'm asking too much of you, but I can't change what I am, Ella. I can only promise that everything I do to keep you safe." "What if keeping me safe means losing yourself?" "Then I lose myself." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "Because without you, there's nothing worth keeping anyway." The words broke something inside her. Ella pulled him into a kiss, desperate and angry and loving all at once. They stumbled backward toward the bed, shedding clothes and defenses, until there was nothing between them but skin and truth. Afterward, they lay tangled together, both of them breathing hard. "I love you," Ella said. She hadn't meant to say it, hadn't planned it, but it came out anyway, raw and real. Dante went completely still. Then he pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "Say it again," he said roughly. "I love you." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "I've loved you since the day I saw you give away that umbrella. I just didn't know what to call it until now." Ella's breath caught. "Dante." "I love you," he said, "and I will burn this entire city down before I let anything happen to you." It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a vow. Ella pulled him back down, kissing him like she could pour all her complicated feelings into his mouth, and he'd understand them better than she did. Maybe he did, because when they finally fell asleep, wrapped around each other like they were the only two people in the world, Ella felt something she hadn't felt in months: peace. The peace lasted exactly 6 days. Ella was in the penthouse studying for midterms when the door burst open and Dante strode in with an expression that made her blood run cold. "Pack a bag," he said. "Now." "What's happening?" "We're leaving. 5 minutes." Ella's heart hammered. "Dante, tell me what's going on." He stopped, his jaw tight. "The Volkov family. They're making a move, a big one, and they're starting with me." Ella knew that name. Russian mob. Brutal and well-connected. Dante had mentioned them once or twice, always with an edge of wariness. "How big a move?" "War." He said it flatly. "They want the East Side, and they're willing to go through me to get it." Ella's hand shook as she grabbed her bag and started throwing clothes into it. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they can't reach us. I have a place upstate, secure, isolated. We'll hole up there until I figure out our next move." "How long?" "However long it takes." They were in the car 15 minutes later, flanked by 3 other vehicles full of Dante's most trusted men. Ella watched the city disappear behind them, her mind racing. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading since the day Dante pulled her into his car. Real war. Not isolated incidents or threats, but full-scale conflict, and she was right in the middle of it. Dante drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Ella reached over and covered his hand with hers. "We'll get through this," she said. "I know." "Do you?" He glanced at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw actual fear in his eyes. "I can't lose you," he said quietly. "Everything else, the business, the territory, the reputation, I can rebuild. But if something happens to you, it won't." Ella squeezed his hand. "You've kept me safe this long. You'll keep doing it. Promise me something." "What?" "If it comes down to it, if you have to choose between me and getting out safely, you run. You don't look back." "Dante, promise me." Ella looked at him, at the man who'd stolen her life and given her a new one, who'd claimed her and protected her and loved her with an intensity that scared them both. "I promise," she lied, because if it came down to it, she knew exactly what she'd choose. And it wasn't running. The safe house was a fortress disguised as a cabin. It sat on 20 acres of wooded land 2 hours north of the city, surrounded by trees and silence. From the outside, it looked rustic, log walls, a stone chimney, wide windows that faced the forest. But inside, it was all reinforced steel, bulletproof glass, and security systems that would make a government facility jealous. Ella stood at the window, watching the sun set through the trees, her arms wrapped around herself. They'd been here for 3 days, and the isolation was starting to press down on her like a physical weight. No school, no routine, just waiting. Dante was in the office he'd set up in the back bedroom, on the phone constantly, coordinating with his people in the city. Planning, strategizing, preparing for a war that felt inevitable. She heard his voice through the door, low, sharp, giving orders she couldn't quite make out. He'd barely slept since they arrived. Barely eaten. Just worked with the kind of single-minded focus that made her worry he'd burn himself out before the Volkovs even made their move. Ella turned from the window and made her way to the kitchen. It was well stocked, Dante's people had seen to that, and she started pulling out ingredients without really thinking about what she was making. Her hands needed something to do. Her mind needed a break from spinning in circles. She was halfway through chopping vegetables when Dante emerged from the office, his hair disheveled, his face drawn. "You need to eat," Ella said before he could speak. "I'm fine. You're not. When's the last time you had a real meal?" Dante frowned, like he was trying to remember. "Yesterday? Try 2 days ago." Ella pointed at the stool by the counter. "Sit." "Ella, sit, Dante, please." Something in her tone made him comply. He sank onto the stool, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Ella continued cooking, grateful for the familiar rhythm of it. She'd learned to cook from her mother, one of the few clear memories she had of the woman who died too young. Her mother had always said food was love made tangible, a way to care for people when words weren't enough. She made pasta with vegetables and garlic, simple but filling. When she set the plate in front of Dante, he looked at it like he wasn't sure what to do with it. "Eat," she said again, softer this time. He picked up his fork and took a bite, then another, and then he was eating properly, like he'd just realized how hungry he actually was. Ella made herself a plate and sat across from him. They ate in silence, the only sound the clink of silverware against ceramic. It was domestic and surreal, and exactly what she needed. "Thank you," Dante said when he finished. "You're welcome." He pushed the plate away and scrubbed his hands over his face. "This is taking too long." "What is?" "Volkov. He's testing me, pushing at the edges, waiting to see how I respond, but he hasn't made his real move yet. Maybe he won't. He will." Dante's voice was certain. "Men like Volkov don't back down. They see weakness and they exploit it. And right now, leaving the city makes me look weak." "You're not weak. You're being smart. In this world, there's no difference." He looked at her, his eyes tired. "Every day I'm here, I lose ground. People start to wonder if I'm still in control, if I'm still worth following." Ella reached across the table and took his hand. "Then go back." Dante's eyebrows rose. "What?" "Go back to the city. Deal with Volkov. End this. I can't leave you here alone. So take me with you." "Absolutely not." "Dante?" "No." His voice was firm. "That's not negotiable. You stay here where it's safe." Ella pulled her hand back, frustration flaring. "I'm tired of being kept in a cage." "This isn't a cage, it's protection. It feels the same from where I'm sitting." She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "I didn't sign up for this life just to be locked away every time things get dangerous. If I'm going to be part of your world, then let me actually be part of it." "You are part of it." "No, I'm a possession you're protecting. There's a difference." The words hung between them, sharp and true. Dante stood too, his jaw tight. "You think I don't know that?" His voice was rough. "You think I like keeping you separate from everything? But the alternative is you getting hurt, and I can't—" He broke off, his hands clenching into fists. "I can't watch you get hurt because of me." "Then teach me how to not get hurt." Ella moved closer. "You've been training me for months. I know how to shoot, how to read a situation, how to defend myself. When are you going to trust that?" "I do trust you." "Then prove it. Let me stand beside you instead of behind you." Dante stared at her, something warring in his expression. Fear and pride and a grudging respect she could see him trying to suppress. "If I bring you back," he said slowly, "you follow my rules. You stay close. You don't take risks, and if I tell you to run, you run." "Okay." "I mean it, Ella. So do I." She stepped closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. "We're in this together, remember? That means all of it, not just the safe parts." Dante covered her hand with his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You're going to be the death of me. Or the saving of you." Ella rose on her toes and kissed him. "Let's go finish this." They left the next morning. Bucket. The city felt different when they returned. Tenser. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the explosion. Dante didn't take Ella back to the penthouse. Instead, they went to another property, a brownstone in a quieter neighborhood that served as a secondary headquarters. It was smaller, more defensible, and currently full of armed men who nodded respectfully when Dante walked through the door. Status, he said to the man who met them in the hallway. His name was Victor, tall, early 40s, with the kind of calm competence that made Ella trust him immediately. 3 more incursions on the docks. They hit one of our shipments 2 nights ago, took everything. We hit back yesterday, took out their distribution center on the west side. Casualties? 2 of theirs. None of ours. Dante nodded, processing. Where's Volkov now? His compound. Hasn't left in days. He's fortifying. Good. That means he's worried. Dante glanced at Ella, then back to Victor. Set up a meeting. Neutral ground. Tomorrow night. Victor's eyebrows rose. You sure that's smart? No, but it's necessary. Dante's voice was firm. This ends one way or another. I'm not dragging it out. After Victor left to make arrangements, Ella turned to Dante. You're going to meet with him face to face? It's the only way to end this without burning the whole city down. He led her into a small office and closed the door. Volkov wants my territory. I want him to back off. We either come to an agreement or we come to war. Either way, it ends tomorrow. And if he tries to kill you during the meeting, then he tries. But he won't succeed. Ella wanted to argue, to tell him it was too dangerous, but she could see the determination in his eyes. This was who Dante was, a man who faced threats head-on instead of hiding from them. What do you need me to do? She asked instead. Dante looked surprised, then something softened in his expression. Stay here. Listen to the conversations. Watch the people who come through. Tell me if anyone seems off. You want me to read the room? Exactly. He cupped her face. You're good at seeing things I miss. I need those eyes tomorrow. Ella nodded, feeling the weight of the trust he was placing in her. I won't let you down. You never have. That night, Ella barely slept. She lay awake in the unfamiliar bedroom, listening to Dante move through the brownstone, checking security, making final preparations. When he finally came to bed around 3 in the morning, she pretended to be asleep. But when he pulled her close, his arms tight around her waist, she let herself relax into him. I'm scared, she whispered into the darkness. Me too, he admitted. It was the first time she'd heard him say it out loud. What if something goes wrong tomorrow? Then we adapt. His breath was warm against her neck. But it won't. I've been doing this too long to make amateur mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes eventually. Not tomorrow. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. Tomorrow, I'm perfect. Ella smiled despite her fear. Cocky. Confident. Same thing. Not even close. He pulled her tighter. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She did sleep eventually, and when she woke, Dante was already gone, preparing for the meeting that would decide everything. The meeting was set for 9 p.m. at a restaurant that had been closed for renovations. Neutral ground, supposedly, though Ella suspected neutral was a relative term in Dante's world. She spent the day in the brownstone, watching people come and go. Dante's inner circle, the men he trusted most, filtered through, each giving reports, receiving orders, preparing for multiple scenarios. Ella listened to it all, her newly trained instincts cataloging details. Who hesitated when speaking? Who seemed nervous? Who had too many questions or not enough? By evening, she'd identified 2 people who made her uneasy. One was a new recruit, barely 20, who kept checking his phone when he thought no one was watching. The other was an older man named Stevens, who'd worked for Dante for years, but whose body language had shifted when Volkov's name came up. She pulled Dante aside before he left. Stevens and the new kid, Tony. Watch them. Dante's eyes sharpened. Why? Tony's communicating with someone he shouldn't be. Stevens is too calm, like he knows something we don't. Dante studied her face, then nodded. Victor, keep those 2 here. Don't let them leave until I get back. Victor moved to comply without question, and Dante turned back to Ella. Anything else? Just, she swallowed. Be careful. He kissed her, hard and quick. Always. Then he was gone, along with 6 of his best men. Ella was left in the brownstone with Victor and a handful of guards. her stomach in knots. The minutes crawled by. Ella paced, made coffee she didn't drink, tried to focus on a textbook and gave up after reading the same paragraph 5 times. Victor stayed calm, monitoring communications, but even he seemed tense. At 9:15, Victor's radio crackled to life. Situation at the restaurant. Ambush. We're pinned down. Ella's blood turned to ice. Victor was already moving, barking orders, coordinating backup. But Ella knew it would take time Dante might not have. She made a decision. I'm going, she said. No, you're not. Victor didn't even look at her. Mr. Russo would kill me. He's going to die if we don't help him now. Ella grabbed her jacket and the gun Dante had given her months ago. You can either come with me or try to stop me, but I'm going. Victor hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then he cursed and grabbed his own weapon. You stay behind me at all times. You follow every order. And if I say run, you run. Deal. They took 2 cars and drove through the city like the devil was chasing them. Ella's heart hammered in her chest, fear and adrenaline making everything sharp and bright. She'd never done anything like this before. Never willingly run toward danger instead of away from it. But Dante was there, and she'd be damned if she hid while he fought for his life. They reached the restaurant to find it surrounded by vehicles and gunfire. Victor parked a block away and they approached on foot, using the darkness and abandoned buildings for cover. There, Victor pointed. Side entrance. We can flank them. They moved quickly, Ella's training kicking in. Stay low, stay quiet, watch for movement. Her gun felt heavy in her hand, but steady. She wasn't that scared waitress anymore. She was someone who fought back. They slipped into the building through a service entrance and immediately heard the chaos, shouts, gunfire, breaking glass. Victor led the way, his weapon up, his movements precise. Ella followed, her breathing controlled despite her racing pulse. They found Dante and his men pinned behind overturned tables in the main dining room. Volkov's men had them surrounded, outnumbering them at least 2-1. It was a slaughter in the making. Victor signaled his team, and they opened fire from behind, catching Volkov's men by surprise. The tide shifted immediately. Dante used the distraction to push forward, taking down 3 men in quick succession. Ella stayed in cover, firing when she had clear shots, her hands surprisingly steady. She hit 1 man in the leg, another in the shoulder. Non-lethal shots, but enough to take them out of the fight. The battle lasted maybe 5 minutes, though it felt like hours. When the gunfire finally stopped, 8 of Volkov's men were down, and the rest had retreated. Dante emerged from cover, blood on his face but alive. His eyes found Ella immediately, and the expression that crossed his face was pure fury. What the hell are you doing here? He demanded. Saving your life, Ella shot back. I told you to stay at the brownstone. And I didn't listen. You're welcome. Dante looked like he wanted to strangle her and kiss her at the same time. He settled for grabbing her arm and pulling her close, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? I'm fine. If you ever... He broke off, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. We'll talk about this later. Looking forward to it. Victor approached, his expression grim. Volkov wasn't here. It was a setup. Dante's eyes went cold. Where is he? Unknown, but we captured 2 of his men. They'll talk. They did talk. Within an hour, Dante had the information he needed. Volkov's actual location, his resources, his plans. And more importantly, he had proof that Stevens had been feeding information to the Volkovs for weeks. Dante dealt with Stevens personally. Ella didn't watch, didn't want to know the details. Some parts of his world she could accept. Others she preferred to leave in the shadows. But she stayed by his side through all of it. Through the interrogations, the planning, the final assault on Volkov's compound that happened before dawn. She didn't fight in that battle. Dante had drawn that line firmly, but she waited, and when he returned victorious with Volkov in custody, she was there. It's over, Dante said, exhaustion clear in every line of his body. Is it? Yeah. He pulled her into his arms. Volkov's finished. His organization's being absorbed or scattered. The territory's secure. What happens to him? He's leaving the country, permanently. If he ever comes back, he knows what happens. Ella nodded, not asking for clarification. Some things were better left unsaid. They went back to the brownstone as the sun was rising, both of them filthy and exhausted and alive. Dante showered first, then Ella, and when she emerged, she found him on the couch, staring at nothing. She sat beside him, and he immediately pulled her into his lap, holding her like she might disappear. You could have died tonight, he said quietly. So could you. That's different. No, it's not. Ella pulled back to look at him. You don't get to risk your life while keeping me wrapped in bubble wrap. Either we're partners or we're not. We're partners, Dante said. But that doesn't mean I'll ever be okay with you being in danger. I know, and I'll never be okay with you being in danger either. But this is the life we chose, so we deal with it, together. Dante's arms tightened around her. I love you. I love you too. Ella kissed him, soft and slow. And I'm not going anywhere. Good, because I'm not letting you go. They stayed like that as the city woke up around them. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and decided to build something anyway. 3 months later, Ella stood in front of a classroom, nervous in a way she hadn't been in a long time. Ms. Marconi? Dr. Chen said from her seat in the back. We're ready when you are. Ella took a breath and launched into her presentation. It was her final project for Dr. Chen's class, a proposal for transforming illegal enterprises into legitimate businesses through strategic investment and reputation management. She'd worked on it for weeks, pouring everything she'd learned from both her classes and her life with Dante into creating something practical. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then Dr. Chen started clapping, and the other students joined in. Exceptional work, Dr. Chen said. I hope you're planning to pursue this in graduate school. I am, Ella said. I've already been accepted to the MBA program here. It was true. She'd applied, been accepted, and would start in the fall. Dante had been impossibly proud, celebrating with champagne and promises that he'd support whatever she wanted to do. After class, Ella walked across campus to where one of Dante's cars was waiting. Security, always, but she'd made peace with it. It was part of the package. She found Dante at the brownstone, which they'd been using more than the penthouse lately. It felt more like home somehow, smaller, more theirs. How'd it go? He asked, looking up from his laptop. I think I nailed it. Of course you did. He pulled her onto his lap. Dr. Chen email you yet? It's been 20 minutes. She will. You're brilliant. He kissed her neck. Speaking of which, I have something to show you. He brought her to his office and pulled out a folder. Inside were business plans, incorporation documents, financial projections, all legitimate, all legal. What is this? Ella asked, flipping through the pages. The beginning. Dante's voice was quiet. I've been working with some people, lawyers, accountants, consultants, setting up real businesses, construction, real estate development, import-export, all clean, all legal. Ella looked at him, her heart swelling. You're really doing it. We're really doing it, he corrected. This is your plan, Ella, your vision. I'm just following your lead. It'll take years. I know, but we have a time. He took her hand. I want to build something that lasts, something we can be proud of. And I can't do that without you. Ella looked down at their joined hands, at the man who'd stolen her from one life and given her another, at the future they were building together, one careful choice at a time. I'm in, she said. All the way. No going back? No going back. Dante pulled her close, and Ella let herself believe in the impossible, that people could change, that love could exist in darkness and still find light, that two broken people could build something whole. It wouldn't be easy. The violence hadn't disappeared completely, and probably never would. There were still threats, still dangers, still nights when Dante came home with blood on his hands. But there were also mornings with coffee and quiet conversation, afternoons studying while he worked beside her, evenings planning a future that looked nothing like their past. 6 months after that, Dante proposed. Not with fanfare or romance, but in their kitchen on a Tuesday while Ella was making breakfast. He just pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, perfect, and asked if she'd marry him. Ella said yes before he even finished the question. They got married in a small ceremony with only a handful of people present. No big production, no spectacle, just them, making promises they intended to keep. And a year after that, when Ella graduated with her MBA and Dante's first legitimate business venture turned its first profit, they stood on the balcony of the penthouse, which they still kept, though they rarely stayed there, and looked out at the city that had brought them together. Do you ever regret it? Dante asked. That night I pulled you into my car? Ella thought about it, really thought about it. About the waitress she'd been, invisible, alone, going through the motions. About the woman she'd become, stronger, sharper, loved. No, she said honestly. I don't regret it. Do you? Not for a second. He pulled her close. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I complicated everything, especially because of that. He kissed her temple. You made me want to be better, to build something instead of just taking. That's worth everything. Ella leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. They'd come so far from that first night, from fear and possession to partnership and love. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been clean, but it had been real. And that was all that mattered. Below them, the city glittered with possibility. Above them, stars they couldn't see but knew were there. And between them, a connection forged in darkness and tempered in fire. It wasn't the life Ella had imagined, it was better. Messier and harder and more complicated, but also richer and deeper and infinitely more real. She'd been invisible once. Just another face in the crowd, another worker bee, another person the world overlooked. But Dante had seen her, really seen her. And in seeing her, he'd given her the most precious gift of all, the chance to see herself clearly, to understand her own strength, to become someone who mattered. Not because she belonged to him, but because she'd chosen to stand beside him. And together, they'd build an empire. Not of crime and violence, but of second chances and hard-won redemption. It would take time. Years, probably. Maybe decades. But they had that time. They had each other. And they had the kind of stubborn determination that made impossible things happen. So when people asked Ella how she'd ended up here, married to a man like Dante Russo, building businesses, living a life that existed somewhere between two worlds, she never quite knew how to answer. Because the truth was complicated. It involved danger and obsession and choices that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. It involved becoming someone new while honoring who she'd been. It involved learning that love wasn't always soft and safe, that sometimes it was fierce and frightening and worth fighting for anyway. But mostly, it involved deciding that she deserved to be seen, to be valued, to matter. And once she'd decided that, everything else fell into place. Years later, when their first fully legitimate venture, a community development project in a struggling neighborhood, broke ground, Ella stood beside Dante at the ceremony and watched him give a speech about second chances and giving back. The man who'd once ruled through fear now talked about building hope. And she knew they'd made it. Not all the way. There was still work to do, still shadows to outrun. But far enough that the future looked bright instead of dark. That night, lying in bed in the brownstone they now called home, Dante turned to her. We did it, he said quietly. We're doing it, Ella corrected. It's not finished. No. But it started. That's something. That's everything. He kissed her, and she kissed him back. And outside their window, the city hummed with life. Millions of people, each with their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments of transformation. Ella had been one of them once, invisible and alone, but not anymore. Now she was Ella Marconi, student, partner, wife, builder of futures. And most importantly, most wonderfully, she was seen.